Hello everyone, my name is Ron Chmielewski and I'm doing a presentation on opals today. It's a stone that I've been intrigued with and have cut into what they call cabochons or rounded rocks, and then also put them in jewelry. They're fascinating just because of the beautiful play of color and also the many different places in the world that they're found. I'm going to go through a little cheat sheet here, which is basically what I've handed out to you. And then I've got a number of examples on little paper plates that I'll pass around so you can actually look at them up close. First thing, what is an opal? It's a gem composed of silica or silicon dioxide. It's in the form of microscopic spheres that kind of agglomerate together. It's an amorphous material, so mineralogically it's called opal. Of the little spheres that make up the opal, if they're all of a uniform size and stacked together in nice even rolls, it can form a diffraction grating, and that's what gives you the little sparks of color. If the little spheres are all sorts of different sizes and jumbled all together, it is still opal, but there's no play of color, and it's called common opal. Opal history. It is believed to be one of the stones in Aaron's breastplate that is referenced in the Bible. It is somewhat hard to interpret because its description has gone through multiple language translations from the original text. Plus, it is referred to as opalus, and opalus was really not a very distinct description and quite often was applied to several types of stone. So there's always a lot of controversy. Was it opal as we understand it or was it not? The other compounding factor, until recently, there was not any known source of opal in what would have been the ancient biblical world. Until in the mid-1980s, they discovered some significant opal deposits in Ethiopia. And Ethiopia was within the realm of the ancient biblical world. So with that find, the scholars are kind of leaning in the direction that opalus in Aaron's breastplate was indeed opal and probably from Ethiopia. Roman history. The ancient Romans valued opal very much. It came from a mine in the area of Slovakia, or what we would now call Slovakia. Those mines have pretty much played out, but in Roman times until probably the earliest 20th century, they were active mines. That's about the same time the opal deposits in Australia were discovered. And they by far are more massive than probably all the other opal mines in the world combined. Opals were first discovered in about 1840 in the state of Queensland, 1869, an area called White Cliffs in 1889, Lightning Ridge, which is the predominant source of black opal, in 1904, and a place called Cooper Pedy in 1920. Most of the white colored opal with the flashes of color that you see in jewelry stores is most likely from Cooper Pedy. They have massive deposits there that they mine by the ton. Supposedly, the lore is that Cooper Pedy is Aboriginal for white man in a hole, because they were there digging for the opals, and the Aboriginals thought these people are nuts. So they named it White Man in a Hole. I would estimate that 90% plus of all opal coming into the market right now comes from somewhere in Australia. Mostly in the states of Queensland, New South Wales, and South Australia. Though there are opals found in almost every state of Australia. It's just that the three that I mentioned are the largest sources. Other current sources are coming out of Ethiopia, British Columbia, Canada, the Western United States, Brazil, Mexico, and Honduras. There are different types of, I'll just say, rocks that are called opal. The lowest grade is by the Australians referred to as potch, P-O-T-C-H, or common opal. This is an opal that can have a range of very beautiful colors. It can be striped. There's one that's called candy stripe opal, but there's no flash of color when you turn it. It just has a body color, and that's all that it has. It can be very beautiful. It makes beautiful lapidary material. There's some of it that fluoresces a very brilliant green. And there's a variety that's called fire opal, which comes out of Mexico, that has no flash of color, but the body color can be a very beautiful cherry red or a deep lemon yellow. And quite often it's faceted and it makes a very beautiful stone. But it's beautiful just because of its transparency and its body color. And typically there is no flash of color in it. It still is highly prized in opal. The opal that has the flash of color when you turn it, most properly is called either precious opal, or an older term is noble opal. Opal can also come in the form of a solid, a doublet, or a triplet. A solid is that the stone that you hold is 100% natural opal as it came out of the earth. A doublet, sometimes you can get some very gorgeous opal that is too thin and too fragile to use. So you can take that opal, you can either put a backing stone on the bottom and then cut it into a cabochon and it's stable enough to put in jewelry, or you can put a quartz cap on the top of it. And then again, you can cut it and you can use it and have a very beautiful stone to work with. So when you look at opals, one critical thing is to look at the side of it. If you see a seam, look at that seam. If it's perfectly straight, nature rarely does perfectly straight. So then it's probably a man-made doublet or possibly a triplet. Sometimes you can look at a stone and you'll see the opal and then you'll see a brown bottom stone, but it's kind of an irregular interface. That is probably a natural boulder opal, and that is 100% as it came out of the ground. But between the brown stone and the colorful opal, it's going to be a wiggly line. That's totally natural. Then opals come in different color varieties. When you look at the opal, rather than looking at all the little flashes of color, you kind of look at what is the overall body tone color of the opal. It can be black, it can be white or gray, it can be crystal, which is kind of transparent, it can be a boulder opal, which is a brownish to very dark brown iron matrix that the opal sits on top of. And then it can be boulder matrix. I describe it as brown pudding with opal spaghetti running through it. There's no one sheet of opal color, but it just kind of runs all through it, and when you cut it, you've got little points of light all over the place. And I have examples of those up in the tray. These terms are used, but with the exception of black opal, there's no formal description or agreement as to what is a white-based opal, what is a crystal opal. A lot of dealers and prominent authors in opals say if you can take the opal and put it on a piece of white paper that has a black cross on it, if you can see the cross through the opal, then it's a crystal opal. If you can't see it, then it's white-based or gray-based. The iron stone is kind of obvious. You look at it, if the back of it is a dark cocoa brown stone, it's a boulder opal. Black opal is the only one that has a formal definition and discrete reference stones to call it a black opal. And that was put together by the Lightning Ridge Miners Association, mainly to protect themselves. And within a black opal, they have 3 grades of blackness before they start turning it just a gray opal. And you can buy little reference cards or even reference stones. The reason they did this is because of the potential extreme value of a black opal. A top grade black opal can go for $10,000 a carat. And there's 5 carats in 1 gram. So if you have a 1 gram stone, you easily can have $50,000 in that stone. My pinky would probably be close to a 10 carat stone. So at $10,000 a carat, at 10 carats, my pinky could be worth 100 grand. So to protect themselves from people that were trying to pass off stones that weren't dark enough as, quote, a black opal, they got together, made a definition, and then that's the way they grade their stones. And if people are selling outside of that grade, they can be pretty aggressive in their pursuit of getting people to correct their ways. Opal value. The value of the opal is based on a number of things. The base color, black being the most valuable, crystal being the second, and then possibly boulder opal, because boulder opal tends to be very bright and very flashy. I got into type of opal, blacks, whites, boulders. The form, whether it's a solid, a doublet, or a triplet, solid opals command the higher prices. If you take an opal and make it into a doublet, if you compare all the characteristics of that stone to a solid opal of the same quality, the doublet is worth about 1/10 as much. Because it was man-made, it's kind of manipulated. So they can be very beautiful. Quite often, once you set them in a ring, you can't tell the solid stone from a doublet. So if you are buying jewelry, you kind of have to really trust the jeweler that you're dealing with. Also, once an opal is cut, it can be very hard to determine exactly where that stone came from. I have some Australian opals up here. I have some Brazilian opals. You can put some of them side by side and you can't tell which one's the Australian, which one's the Brazilian. And for a while, at least, I've heard some speculation to this. The Brazilian opals are very stable. They're very beautiful, but they don't have the recognition of Australian opals. So to get a better price for their opals, the Brazilians would mine them, ship them to Australia to sell them, get a better profit because, quote, they came from Australia, and then go back to Brazil and do some more mining. I think they've established, people have seen them, seen the beauty, seen the stability of their opals, and I think now they can direct market them because they've really proven that they're good quality opals. But for a while, they were kind of doing a little shuffle game, or at least that's been alleged. Care for opals. They're pretty tough stones. They can get damaged. So with that in mind, if you're doing heavy work around the house or household washing, if you do have an opal ring, I would take it off. Not only can it get mechanically damaged, but potentially in strong cleaning solutions, it may absorb and discolor the opal over time. Definitely do not freeze them or put them in high temperatures. Opal does contain some water within its structure, and if you freeze it, there is a potential they can crack. I've taken some and I've frozen them and I've never had one crack on me, but that is one caution. Also, heat will definitely make them pop like popcorn. I've heated them very gently with the torch just to see what's going to happen. It starts popping like popcorn. But like if you forget it and you leave it on the window ledge on your car and it sits out in the parking lot in the sun, potentially it could get hot enough just to cause some of it to pop. Do not store it in a safe deposit box in the bank. This came from one of the dealers that I worked with that also appraised jewelry and seen many crazed opals come out of safety deposit boxes. Two things that he attributes the problem to is safe deposit box areas are usually kept very dry to protect all the paperwork that might be in them. real dry conditions are not good for opals. There is some water in their structure. Given years sitting in a very dry environment inside a safe deposit box, it may dry them out and cause them to craze. The other thing that he was concerned about is that many banks run ultrasonic intrusion detection in their safe deposit box vaults. And his concern is that constant bathing of ultrasonic signal may affect the opals. He had a lot of years of experience and appraised a lot of stones that came out of safe deposit boxes, so I'm just going with his wisdom. If you do need to clean it, soap, water, and a soft toothbrush. Just have at it like you're brushing your teeth, and it should take all the dirt off of them. And it's good to wear your opals frequently. The light coating of body oils that will coat the opal will give it a little bit of a moisture barrier, and it'll actually help it retain its moisture and stay fresh. Any questions on anything I've covered?
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned if it gets too dry, that's a problem. Do you have any idea how dry, like what percent of humidity is a problem?
Nope.
No? Okay.
And like I said, I don't even know for certain that banks do run their safe deposit box areas really dry, but that was just his experience and his comments.
Okay, and then sorry, go ahead.
So, you know, if you've got your $100,000 opal ring, you might want to think about where you're going to safely store it.
Okay. The second question, you mentioned stability of the Brazilian opals. So
Yes.
I take it that there's some opals that are more stable than others? And if
Yes.
so, which ones are most stable?
Yes. You don't know.
Oh, okay.
There are a lot of sources out of Australia that's pretty much regarded as being very stable. When they do open up a new mining area, it's kind of wait and see when it first comes out. A lot of the new areas, they'll mine it, they'll cut it into a cabochon, and then they'll sit there and wait for a year and see if it starts to crack or craze. And then if it's stable for that period of time, they're pretty certain that they can sell it and stand behind their product. It all depends on how it was mined. There was a mine in Australia that was producing some absolutely gorgeous opals. But as they mined, they kept getting closer and closer to the outback airstrip. And then they got a problem. They wanted to get the opal under the airstrip, but you can't dig under the runway. So the miners finally negotiated to shut down the airstrip, which is just a gravel strip, for 1 week. They had to get in, get the opal, and rebuild the airstrip in 1 week. So to do that, they said, aha, we'll use dynamite and we'll just loosen up all the dirt and take the opal out. Worked beautiful. Until they started cutting the opal, and within weeks it would start to craze and crack. And in the trade, it was referred to as airport opal. And they took material that was probably worth $1,000 an ounce and made it worthless.
Oh my gosh.
But then the dealer I worked with, he said, okay, I can do something with this. He went and he bought a quantity of it. Got it for dirt cheap because no one else wanted to touch the stuff. He put it in a plastic bag, took a rawhide mallet and just sat there and mashed it all up into little BB-sized pieces. Then he put it in little vials and made little hanging necklaces out of it. The stuff is just great color, great flash, but he's already taken what was its disadvantage, broken it up into little pieces, and you know, he had something in probably about the size of a double shot glass, just the raw material that he was selling for $400. He probably paid $40 for the raw material. Because again, it had a very bad reputation. There wasn't anybody in the industry pretty much that wanted to touch the stuff. So again, a lot of how it's treated. There's the Ethiopian opal. There's a lot of it coming out of Ethiopia that is absolutely gorgeous and stable and beautiful to cut. And then there's some of it that isn't even more gorgeous. The color is even brighter, but it's unstable if you take it out of water. The beautiful material runs about $30 a gram. The unstable stuff you can buy for $2 a gram. But again, it's only, you know, pretty, put it on the shelf, enjoy looking at it. There is a black opal out of Virgin Valley, Nevada in the US. Some of the most beautiful stuff I've ever seen. Some of it is stable, Some of it is leave-in water only, because if you don't, it'll crack. If you're buying it, you really have to get to know your dealer and trust who you're dealing with. And know someone where you know they're at, that if you really get something that turns bad, you can go back and have a discussion with them. So, any other questions? Okay, let me go on to the hands-on display. Yep, you can hand that one. Let me talk about them first, and then I'll let you hand them out. This is an example of what they call potch, or common opal. There is no play of color to it. It can range from whitish to grayish to pure black. It does have some uses. You can cut it as is, and it can make a very shiny, pretty black stone. Or you can make little thin slices of it, glue an opal on top of it, and then cut it as a doublet, and you can get a very bright, beautiful stone. What I compare it to is, if you have a Christmas tree, and in the middle of the day, you turn the lights on, they're kind of washed out, and But if you wait till night, when there's a black background, and you turn the same lights on, the lights just pop at you. That's the same thing you can do to a thin piece of opal if you put a black backing on it and make it a doublet or possibly a triplet. You can take the color and really make it pop, make it look very beautiful. But again, versus a solid, natural stone of the same beauty, it's only worth a tenth as much. But again, if it's something beautiful and it's in your price range, you know, as long as you know what you're buying, go for it. Would you hand that out, please? The next step up is other different kinds of common opal, things that are commonly used by people to cut stones out of. There's a dendritic opal that is kind of yellow-orange with little black dendrites going through it. That comes out of Australia. Very beautiful stone to cut. This is the fire opal, or common opal, out of Mexico. Again, it can be faceted or cut as a cabochon. Very beautiful stone. There's a blue and a pink variety of common opal that comes out of Peru. That again is very beautiful to cut. The blue stuff can get a little pricey. That can run $1 or $2 a gram to buy. The next step up is what they call potch and color. If you're just starting to cut opal, this is the kind of stuff you might want to buy and torture and figure out what you're doing. It will cut pretty much the same as many of the better grades of opal, but you're going to pay maybe $10 an ounce for this stuff. So you can afford to just cut it, see what happens, trial and error, and if you ruin the stone, yeah, you lost a couple bucks, no big deal. So good practice material to work on. It's also kind of some neat stuff to tumble polish, because there'll be little flecks of color all through it. This is light or white-based opal. Very common, mined in very large quantities. It's basically milky white with various flashes of color in it. Again, next step up, this might range anywhere from $10 to $100 an ounce. So if you're starting to learn, this is where you might start as the second step, start cutting some prettier stones to maybe even try wire wrapping or doing jewelry. When you're done, you can just put them over there.
Okay, I'll pass it.
And then why don't you pass this one out? Thank you. The next step up is crystal opal. It's one, if you put it on a white piece of paper with a cross, you should be able to see the cross through it. This can have some very brilliant color, where this can be very nice if you set it in an open back setting, and then if it's worn on like a black sweater, again, you've got the black background and all the colors just pop out. And then we've got boulder opal. This one is basically in an ironstone matrix, which is cocoa brown to sometimes almost black. It's believed to have formed in an underground water flow, where for some reason in the ancient earth in Australia, there's a water course that flew underground, and something would start little iron concretions to grow. And in some cases, the conditions were right, where silica precipitated out and formed precious opal in the little cracks in spaces within the ironstone. There's a field called the Yahweh field where they mine something called Yahweh nuts. And they can kind of look like almonds to chicken egg size. And they go underground and they can mine them by the thousands. The only trouble is they're lucky if 1 in 100 actually has opal in it. So when the miners mine them and bring them up by the bucketful, the first thing they do is they take a couple of them, put it on an old railroad tie and smack it with a hammer. If it cracks open and there's nothing but ironstone, chuck it out, get them another one. When they finally get one that has color in it, they'll then take that bucket and go to a lapidary saw and start cutting them. Make sure that they don't smack too many of them that have good color on them. Occasionally they will find one that the matrix is solid black and the opal on the inside is bright crystal opal. And I've seen pictures of some of those that have sold for $250,000 for one of them. So again, if a miner hits the right one, that's the pay dirt for a good share of his life. Oh, thank you. I keep forgetting about you.
Does all boulder opal come from Australia?
No.
No, okay.
The majority of it does, and I think that's where the name was coined. The only other source that I know of for certain is out of British Columbia, Canada. They have opal that runs through the country rock, and they term it boulder opal. Other than that, I don't know of any other places that claim to have boulder opal, but there might be. This is something called Toluca Matrix opal. It's basically something like a quartz sandstone that was infused with opal, and you have all the bright flashes of color in the opal. I always refer to it as the opal that a chemist can love, which is my background, because when it comes out of the ground, it's kind of a cruddy tan color, and you can see very little bit of the opal color in it. The traditional way of treating it is to cut it into thin slices, dry it, soak it in a saturated solution of sugar in a warm bath for a couple days to a week, take it out, shake all the liquid solution off of it, put it in a canister of concentrated sulfuric acid, and then boil it. Nothing hazardous about that. What happens is the sulfuric acid takes all of the sugar and carbonizes it. It's like burning the cookies. And then when you rinse it out and soak it with water, you've turned the stone black and all the colors just pop on it. A newer technique for doing this is that you still use the sugar bath, but then you dry it and you put it in an oven that you trust the temperature on, and you take it up to about 450 degrees. That is literally warm enough to burn the cookies. And then it's a much safer way of doing it. You have a much safer stone because there can't be any acid residue because it never contacted acid. The tricky part is if your oven hits 500 degrees, it irreversibly kills all the opal color. So like I said, you gotta have an oven that you really trust. Okay. The next series are some opals from different locations in the world. This is Ethiopian opal. The first deposit that was found is the top one. The body color was anything from cherry brown to very cocoa brown. Beautiful material, tends to be unstable. The newer opal that's referred to as Wellow opal is predominantly a crystal type opal, has absolutely phenomenal color. It's a very gorgeous material. Early on, there were a lot of claims that it was unstable. I'm not certain how accurate that is, because a lot of that information came from the Australian opal dealers, so you gotta wonder about the source.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Stop.
Lightning Ridge opal, the most prominent source for black opal in the world. There are several other deposits in Australia that generate black opals, but it was first found in Lightning Ridge, and most of it comes from Lightning Ridge. The area got its name because it used to be a very prominent sheep farm, and there is a ridge that runs through it that was known historically to occasionally electrocute sheep that were up on it during a thunderstorm. So the place got known as Lightning Ridge, and then they found the opal deposit in it. Opals are very fickle. There is no rhyme or reason for the most part of where they are. Some miners kind of get a feel of looking at the pattern of tree growth that found a crack in the earth that followed it to the water supply. That may mean that there's opal down there. There's no rhyme or reason. There's a story of one old miner that came in kind of down on his luck. People felt sorry for him, so they sent him out to the back of the garbage dump, gave him a little dirt to dig in so they keep him happy. Hit $1 million patch of opal. They have no idea where it is sometimes. Opals from Mexico. Quite often you will see them that they're bits of very bright, flashy opal in a tannish matrix rock. And when the opal is cut, they cut the matrix rock and the opal all as one cabochon. That's the majority of Mexican opals, though some of them, there is enough opal where they can cut it clean, 100% opal. So I guess in a way, since they're cutting the opal in the rock, you could refer to that as a boulder opal. The Mexicans don't, but it kind of fits the description. I keep forgetting you, all right. Well, opal from Louisiana. This was found, I'll say in the 80s. Kind of an unusual location and source. Again, it's some type of sandstone that's been infused with opal. It was located and found on land leased and owned by a forestry company. The gentleman that found it mined it for a couple of years. There's still believed to be a lot of it out there, and for some reason the forestry company decided they didn't like him on their land anymore and blocked access, and no one's been able to get back there for decades to see if there really is more in the ground. Not the most beautiful stuff in the world, but coming out of Louisiana and America, it's just kind of interesting stuff. Luke, I will now wait for you. Thank you. Another type of boulder opal comes out of a field called Karit in Queensland, Australia. This can come in some pretty large chunks where you can slab it into like slices of bread, and then you look for some pretty opal pattern within the slice of bread, and you cut that out and cut and polish it. And I have quite a few examples of boulder opals up on the display case. Look. Another source of opal is out of Honduras. This particular one is, I'll call it a matrix opal. It's actually a basalt that all the little gas holes in the basalt, which is a volcanic rock, were infused with precious opal. So you've got kind of a black background and all little points of light on it. There are other varieties of opal that come out of Honduras, but I've not been able to get my hands on them. I've only seen pictures of it. And last but not least, if the stone is gorgeous and valuable, there will be imitations out there. I have a series of stones here that are called Slocum Stone. I believe it's some variety of fancy glass. It was developed by John Slocum in Rochester, Michigan. And it's a very beautiful imitation, very brightly colored. he, let's say, irritated the Public Works Department of Royal Oak as he was making it and refining his formulation and failing and filling up his garbage cans with very heavy scrap glass that didn't quite work out. And they finally refused to pick up his dumpsters anymore because they were too heavy. He passed away in 1979 and left no record of how he made it. So the material is kind of scarce to find anymore. The other one is very close to the appearance of natural opal, and it's called Gilson Oval. Again, I believe it to be some type of glass. And one of the neat features of this is that it's very temperature stable. I have seen artisans take some of the Gilson Opal, embed it in clear glass using glass blowing techniques, and then hang it up as little Christmas ornaments. On close inspection, any jeweler or anybody that's used to opals can immediately spot that it is Gilson Opal and that it is fake. Because if you look at it with the magnifying glass, the little pieces of opal color kind of look like a little mosaic. You can start seeing little square and defined edges. And you don't see that in natural opal. Moderately expensive, but again, very gorgeous, very durable. That's all the examples I have. Under the light here is a series of opals if you want to come up and take a look at them. There's just a bowl of opals, of different opals that I've tumble polished. And this is a big old chunk of Queensland, Australia. It's a chunk of boulder opal. And where it's split off, you can see some of the precious opal that's lying on top of the ironstone. And that could be carefully cut out and then cut into a gem. The reason I have the light for the opal, the beauty of an opal is very much dependent on the light that you look at it under. The opal itself really has no color, it's just a white stone. But because of the way it can be formed, the little spheres, all in neat, orderly rows, it forms what's called a diffraction grating. So the light comes in, it gets split into a rainbow, and then that's what comes back to your eyes. So if you don't have all the colors of light coming into the stone, you can't have all the colors of light coming back out. So the best way to look at an opal is in bright sunlight coming over your shoulder, because then you can hold it up, the sunlight is coming right to it, you don't have any glare in your eye, and then you can turn it around. Next best is, this is an light that was developed for crafters that need to look at color balance, like bead artists, sometimes maybe paintings, but it's a full spectrum light that mimics what the sun will do. So you can look at an opal under it and you can see all the colors that the stone truly has. There's also one stone up here, thing I didn't mention. It's called orientation, which can greatly affect the value of the stone. And this oval, if you hold it in one direction up, you'll have a beautiful play of colors in the stone. If you turn it 180 degrees, it looks very blah. Again, that drastically affects the color of the stone, because then if you're a designer using it in jewelry, however you do your jewelry, it's got to be like that. You put it sideways, it looks ugly. You put it upside down, it looks ugly. So you're limited to what you can do with it. If you have an opal that you can turn it any way vertically or any way horizontally, and if the color is very bright and intense, then you've got a top value stone, because a designer can do anything with it. So that's all I have. You're welcome to come up and look at the opals, or if there's any other questions from the group. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.